special edition of Cover Story, where we will be discussing President Obama's big-ticket visit to India. For that, I have a very distinguished panel. I have BJP leader Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, former Congress Union Minister Manish Tiwari, political analyst Veer Sanghvi, and BJD MP Jay Panda. Welcome to this show. Veer, can I begin with you to put the whole visit into perspective? First time a US president is attending the Republic Day parade. How big is it?
I think it's a huge deal for this government for many, many reasons. First of all, the sheer symbolism of the president of the world's, they call greatest democracy, the world's largest democracy together. I think there's huge significance, particularly on the occasion of Republic Day. But more than that, there are other messages. There's a message for India, which had slipped off the front pages, which was seen as being off the world's radar. It's a way of announcing that we're back in people's consciousness. And for Modi, of course, personally, the message is very significant. This is the country that denied him a visa for many, many years. And here is the president of that country coming as his guest for Republic Day. You can argue, as many people have, that Obama is a lame duck president and perhaps nothing will come of the visit. And maybe that's right. But in symbolic terms, it's hard to deny its significance.
Dr. Swamy, who is this visit more important for, Modi or Obama?
Well, for Obama, it's important because he's trying to get India to come on board on this fight against the ISIS.
That is.
He had expected that Modi would make that commitment when he went to Washington, but Modi didn't. And I think he's still very keen on that, and certainly he thinks that his coming here, the atmospherics would also help him. And there may be some change, it's not quite clear. As of now, I don't think there's been a decision. For Modi, it's naturally, he had more or less taken this kind of line which the Americans find conducive of visiting Japan, then speaking in favor of Vietnam, and so on. And so also trying to persuade the Sri Lankans to give up the Chinese involvement. So I think from a geostrategic side, Modi has made a shift a little more radically than
but
the previous
Manish, this Obama's come before. This is his second visit. Obama-Manmohan wasn't such a big deal.
Well, you need to put the Indo-US relationship in a certain perspective. You see, the high point of the Indo-US relations was undoubtedly the Indo-US civil nuclear engagement. After all,
why am I not surprised?
No, after all, it helped break the nuclear apartheid, which was institutionalized, post the 1974 peaceful nuclear explosion in Pokhran. Now the question is that what is the next big idea in the Indo-US relationship? And unfortunately, through the Obama years, possibly because he inherited an economy which was in its greatest crisis since the 30s, there were two wars they were fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. So they were preoccupied or distracted with that. The relationship did not slip, but the relationship plateaued. And as Veer was pointing out, there is maybe a lot of symbolism to the visit. But relationships between countries are supposed to be substantive. And what I find missing, or the missing piece in this entire exercise, is what is the next big idea? Because if you look at it from the American perspective, there are two things which are happening in Asia. One is the rebalance, the Asia pivot. Missing, or the missing piece in this entire exercise, is what is the next big idea? Because if you look at it from the American perspective, there are two things which are happening in Asia. One is the rebalance, the Asia pivot. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, I don't think we very much fit into that or would like to fit into that. The second thing which is happening is the drawdown in Afghanistan. Now, if the government in Afghanistan doesn't hold, would India really be asked in terms of its strategic relationship to put boots on the ground? I don't think there is any appetite in India. And for that matter, neither is it wise to do that. So therefore, you are really seeing a visit which may be in symbolic terms important for the government, but in substantive terms, it's not going to do anything for the Indo-US relationship.
See, this is what happens when we have two lawyers on the table. So you decide.
Well, let me answer the question that Manish has been asking as to what is the next big idea after the civil nuclear deal. The next big idea has already happened, actually. Without very much fanfare, the US has quietly, since last year, become India's single largest defense supplier. And this would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Yes, the civil nuclear deal was a fundamentally important deal in that it reoriented the relationship. But ironically, the civil nuclear deal itself has not led to anything between the US and India. Because of the liability laws, the US suppliers, which are private sector suppliers, are not able to take on that liability. We have no nuclear plants coming on because of US suppliers. We are getting a few from other countries. But let me put things in context. The context is that over the last 18 or so years, since the late 90s, since the last part of President Clinton's administration and the first part of Prime Minister Vajpayee's administration, over 3 administrations on each side, the two countries have been getting closer. The thing is, it's not been a single continuum. It's not a smooth continuum. I would call it a step function. So you have a consolidation for a while, and then you have a surge for a while. Last 2 or 3 years have been, as I said, quietly on the defense front, but not much else. There's intelligence sharing that is happening. You're beginning to see some cooperation on tackling terrorism that we face from particularly cross-border terrorism. As far as what could be the next big idea beyond defense, I think there's plenty of scope. The two largest democracies, irrespective of which one is greater, the two largest democracies have inherently a lot in common, as Prime Minister Vajpayee had said, natural allies. Because of Cold War considerations, for many decades we had found ourselves on opposite sides. But the last 18 or so years that has been bringing us together, I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see a real blossoming of this relationship on many fronts.
Blossoming of the relationship, but how did this relationship really begin to thaw? You know, which Prime Minister, would we say Vajpayee, would you say Rao, that really thawed the relationship?
Well, it's hard to say, but I think the real difference had nothing to do with the US or with India. It had to do with the fall of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s. India had very little alternative but to make overtures to the United States. Until then, our attitude had been extremely patronizing. Kissinger writes in his memoirs that when Mrs. Gandhi met Nixon, she lectured him in the manner of a schoolmistress talking to a slightly backward child. So there was that same level of distrust and hostility on both sides. It changed to some extent when Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister. He was well received by President Ronald Reagan. Bush took him off, the first Bush, the older Bush, to his ranch in Texas. They got along very well, but it was episodic. As J.S. said, there was no continuity. It was under Narasimha Rao that we made a conscious attempt to reorient our foreign policy, to get out of the hangover of the Cold War and try and develop a relationship with the United States. And that's pretty much what we've done, but as Jay correctly said, in fits and starts.
You know, the Congress has not really, despite the nuclear deal, which was also more Manmohan than a Congress initiative, really. What is their feeling? Do they feel that they let an opportunity slip by?
Well, first of all, the Indo-US civil nuclear engagement was not only about the civil nuclear engagement. It was a much broader strategic engagement to help India to break out, as I earlier pointed out, of the nuclear apartheid that we had been subjected to. And to that extent, that entire initiative has worked. It may not have had spin-offs for the US, and they are, in fact, fairly cut up about that in terms of being able to sell civil nuclear technology to India because we decided to bifurcate liability. But that's a call which the Indian Parliament consciously took for the good, bad, and the ugly. The important thing is, where do you go from here? And I have written about it earlier also, that the next big idea from our perspective, whether it fits in with the US or not is another matter altogether, is that we must make a conscious effort to join the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty as a nuclear weapon state. The time has come for India to move from being a rule taker to a rule maker. Can this government lay the foundation for that? That is imperative. In terms of being the largest defense supplier or replacing the erstwhile Soviet Union, I don't think that should really be a benchmark in determining a relationship. In fact, on the contrary, it has something to do with our inability to manage our neighborhood, which essentially entails such a huge defense expenditure.
Dr. Swamy, inability to manage a neighborhood, this message vis-a-vis China, what
Well, we should have good relations with China. I mean, you
But
can't rely
Obama's
on...
visit here instead of going to China?
No, that's okay. But Americans are great ones at cost-benefit analysis. They're very practical people.
So
There's
is
no
your Mr.
sentiment.
Modi.
Well, I wouldn't say. We are Indians by nature are a little more sentimental. We get carried away by gestures. But United States has many things to offer us, the technology. For instance, on arms, we have, according to me, Manish may not like what I'm saying, but I think we have been a great setback for our defense in the last 10 years. And we need to really augment modern weapon systems, and the Americans are ready to give, provided we sign a secrecy clause, which means they will be very intrusive about that. They think we are a country that leaks, and they will, if you give them India design, will go to China. So they, not because we want to do it as a government, but because they think that Indians are not very good at keeping secrets. So, but I think this is one area where we should sign and get the best technology from the United States. But as far as China is concerned, the Chinese are also concerned about terrorism. They are concerned about the growing influence of Pakistan-trained terrorists in Xinjiang. And I think it's impossible for us to do anything about Afghanistan without the support of the Chinese. And therefore, we should maintain that relationship. And the question is now the diplomatic skill on how you manage the Americans and the Chinese at the same time.
And Modi has those skills.
He can do it, yes, because he's a decisive person.
We are a country that leaks. Can we keep America's secrets, or will we kiss and tell?
Well, as Dr. Swamy was pointing out, and he's one of the preeminent experts in making sure that some secrets don't stay in. No, I think he said it correctly, that it's not about the intention of the government, but we need to have updated 21st century systems and procedures to safeguard. But I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about something else. We've talked about defense, and of course defense is crucial. For decades, the number one supplier used to be Russia, and we had those neighborhood challenges. We have bigger challenges today. It is crucial. But I want to talk about some of the other opportunities that are there, whether you look at investment, whether you look at renewable energy, for example. Today, solar technology has advanced so much that it is approaching grid parity in terms of cost of generation. So we are at the verge of a tipping point over the next 2 or 3 years, I think. And certainly there could be potential with the US. This would also tie in to the pressures that we are beginning to face for climate change and reduction of carbon emissions. Education, as a country where not a single university, not a single IIT ranks in the top 200 in the world regularly, year after year, and it is the US which dominates that list, as the top 200 universities in the world is dominated by US universities.
And Indian brains.
A lot of Indian brains. And what is happening with the technology is that you are having these online courses now, pioneered by institutions like MIT and by many others, where I think there is phenomenal opportunity. All this is possible, and the US is not the only source, but is one of the preeminent sources where we can.
And this bag of goodies will come to us because we are sending out the right optics, you think?
No, it has to be in both sides' interest. It's not that we are out there with a begging bowl and that we are looking for some imperial power to give us benefits. Let's be very clear. In purchasing power parity, India is today the third largest economy in the world. And in pure hard currency terms, we are going to be the third largest in not very many years. So we sort of dropped the ball for a while, and our
10 years?
Well, I don't want to point fingers, but I think a lot of the economic slowdown was self-made. It was not entirely connected to the global economic slowdown. Whatever be the case, but we must also recognize in the past there was too much hubris, and we sort of started assuming that India will become automatically the next economic superpower. Nothing is automatic. We have to keep slogging at it. So opportunities exist today.
Manish, you want to take on the hubris and the dropping the ball for 10 years?
Well, if the ball would have been dropped for 10 years, you wouldn't have had the engagement in the first place. The fact is that because there was a sustained attempt, despite the fact that the people who had initiated the next steps in strategic partnership decided to go right back and revise whatever they had done from 1999 to 2004, because Dr. Swamy may not like that, for political opportunism, so therefore there is no question of dropping the ball at all. See, the point which Jay is making is that there is potential for cooperation, whether it is education or it is the entire paradigm of information technology. But we also need to acknowledge that the US economy, even today, is fairly sluggish. So therefore, the kind of investments that we are talking about, or the investments that we are looking at, whether the United States really has that potential to invest in hard currency terms, is something which we need to also look at very hard. And the final point which I would like to make is that eventually, from the US's perspective, India is a strategic ally, or they've been trying to make India a strategic ally. Does it really lie in our interest to become a strategic ally in the sense as the US understands it, or maintain our strategic autonomy? That's a question that we need to decide based upon our national interest.
Yeah, but I'd like to add here.
No, go on. I have nothing significant to say.
The thing is, I am uncomfortably in agreement with you.
So at least we have one breakthrough.
This man is in trouble today.
United States strategic ally means junior partner. They have no equal partners, and they don't deal with you on that basis. That comes natural to them. I think what Panda said is in fact the crucial point, that there are areas where we can gain a lot. Now take for instance, as he said about this online education, there's EDX. Incidentally, that was invented by an Indian in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Professor Sharma of Computer Sciences. So that means it's a virtual classroom. You can actually attend Harvard and MIT classes. And imagine it goes to these smaller cities. It will have a huge impact. Let me say the United States is such a practical country that tomorrow, if it feels that you are a person you are a country which could be equal to them in strength, and its influence, and Indian influence in East Asia is very strong potentially, then I don't think that the Americans would be with you. They may not be, and atmospherics will be with you, but they are going to balance you against China. So don't think of Americans building you as a counter to China. This dream that the Indians have, you must wake out of it.
And what about Pakistan?
I actually want to say that it's a bad program from your perspective because everybody is agreeing with everybody. But I want to agree with two things that Manish Tiwari said. One was when he talked about the big idea, and the other was when he talked about the strategic alliance. I want to take you back to the nuclear deal because that was the last big landmark event in the relationship. When the nuclear deal was signed, it had two different components. The first was the end of nuclear apartheid, which every Indian surely welcomed. The second was the fear expressed by the Congress, or elements in the Congress, and certainly the left, that what we were agreeing to was a strategic alliance in which we would be, to use Dr. Swami's phrase, a junior partner. Dr. Singh countered this by saying that we have to open up and allow billions of dollars of American investment to come, and we have a small window to end poverty, etc., etc. As we know, neither of those things happened. The money didn't come. It could be because of the nuclear liability deal. It could be because the American economy went to the toilet in the interim. And even the strategic alliance thing never really took off. So what you have now is a relationship in search of big ideas. America has a big idea when it comes to Pakistan. They're sort of joined at the hip by their interests in fighting terrorism in Afghanistan. It's a huge trading partner with China, so they're joined at the hip. With India, there is, I think, goodwill on both sides, and certainly many initiatives will occur, but there still isn't a big idea.
How far can goodwill take you? What, according to you, should be the next big idea?
Well,
apart from, you outline some things, but we need some big specific
goodwill on both sides, and certainly many initiatives will occur, but there still isn't a big idea.
How far can goodwill take you? What, according to you, should be the next big idea?
Well,
apart from, outline some things, but we need some big specific things.
If it were up to me, it ought to be education, because we have this demographic dividend, as we call it, and yet we know that it can equally be a demographic nightmare, and we need to rapidly ramp up. We have a challenge on our hands, so that would be my preference. But there's agriculture, there's, as I said, solar energy, there's so many other areas. The reality is when it comes to a relationship with the US, very important points have been made, or vis-a-vis China, we all have our individual national interests that will be, that will take prime focus for each country. Because we're getting closer to America doesn't change the fact that our actual largest trading partner is China. And also it is on our border.
Yeah,
so we have challenges as well as opportunities with China. And the same thing goes with the US.
And may I add to this? See, the thing is, the problem is what's going to happen to Pakistan. Supposing the Pakistanis today, the civil society doesn't count for very much in Pakistan. So what are the people who contest? They are mostly connected with jihad indirectly or directly.
No arguments.
Yes, and the ISIS influence is vastly increased because LET is more or less merged into that. Now, if the ISIS comes to our doorstep, that is the time we have to decide whether we are going to be with the United States in the war against terror or not. The United States has declared war against, and today in the when you saw the address to the State of Union address, he said very clearly that we are going to count our friends as those who stand by us in this war against
So what will
ISIS.
Modi say when...
I think Modi should commit to the extent possible with the United States on this. And they, by the way, the ISIS says that these three countries, Israel, United States and India, they are the enemies of Islam. So they don't make any distinction, no matter how much nuances you build into your policy. So on that issue, our relationship with America, whether it's going to be really collaborative or not, will depend on our stand on ISIS.
How do you see Modi taking this, Veer?
I think Modi is in an awkward position because while the Americans talk about the war on terror and if you're with us, you're with us, if not, you're against us, etc. So this was George W. Bush. During the same period, Pakistan was clearly not with them. And yet they were in bed with Pakistan, which was keeping Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad near a military tank. So the American attitude to terror, or to secrecy, after Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks, I think the Americans have a lot of nerve telling anybody else about secrecy. So the American attitudes are not as clear-cut as the rhetoric. There is a lot of complexity in American attitudes. Yes, we would like to join the war on terror, but the war on terror, as far as America is concerned, seems to end at India's borders. The Pakistanis are saying what Hafiz says, that we cannot send them back to you because you don't have enough evidence. There are countless people who they've picked up, put a black bag over their heads, put on aeroplanes and sent them as part of extraordinary rendition to America, where they're never heard of again. They don't worry about terror being something you can prove in a court or not. Yet the Pakistanis adopt a completely different attitude towards India, and America goes along with this. So when the Americans say they want our help in the war on terror, we say, yes, let's start with Pakistan, and there it stops.
No, but the thing is that this is precisely why Pakistan is important, because on crucial things, including providing their territory, which we can't do, for their anti-terrorist actions, the Pakistanis are compliant. And as you say, that when somebody has to be picked up for the American interrogation, they are very forthcoming. So on fundamentals, the Pakistanis are with the Americans. We are the ones who...
On terrorists who attack America, not on terrorists who attack India.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the distinction.
No, Americans are all cost-benefit analysis, exactly. Said it from beginning.
No, but the difficulty is that the relationship is also very complex. You see, the Pentagon has a traditional relationship with the Pakistani army establishment. At the same point in time, the Americans have been exasperated by the Inter-Service Intelligence Agency and their patronage of various terrorist groups, both on the western border and the eastern border. Then the political relationship really does not count for very much because in Pakistan, the political leadership does not control strategic or security policy. So therefore, if we are expecting the US to heavy lift on our problems with Pakistan, I think we are living in an illusion. The fact is that we'll have to do it ourselves. And the sooner we disabuse ourselves of this notion that somebody else is going to come out and help us, the better would be. And the classical case in point is this warning which has been given to Pakistan. Do not do anything while Obama is there. Does this ISPO facto mean that you can do everything when Obama is gone? So,
Okay, on that note, I think we'll have to end. But all in all, I think we all agree on that we have a very exciting 3 days to look forward to when Obama visits India. But from us, that's all for now. Thank you for watching this edition of Cover Story.